Hello everyone, my name is Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Stonesy Reads, or Reading with Stonesy. We're gonna go back to reading Minecraft Legends today. And yeah. The ending of the other book was, it still surprised me. It's still nuts, but now we're gonna push this book because I did start it and now I want to end it as fair. And then we're reading, let's do the math here, people. We're reading 20 pages a day, right? You're going to do the math here. 20 pages a day. We're on episode 2, meaning we're going to get to 40, right? So all we have to do is minus 21. And we have about, 10 more episodes. 10 more of this. 10 days away, this book will be done in a past memory. So, yeah. Let's do this. Chapter 3. Heading in. Farnham wasn't sure if his friends were just humoring him or not, but the idea that they were talking him seriously about going into the cave gave him a bit of a thrill. They had all seen so much more of the world than he had. He felt ashamed sometimes, but maybe his would be the first step toward rectifying that. It also terrified him, but he was going to ignore that. He had already stood outside of his cave for much longer than he cared to admit, trying to force himself to enter it. With his friends at his side, he felt confident that he could finally do it. Grinchard reached into their own backpack, produced a torch, and lit it. Micro did the same, shooting Farnham a questioning glance as he did. He just stared at her, clueless as to what she meant by it. "Do you have a torch?" she finally said. Oh, he did. He fished out of a pack as fast as he could. He fumbled a bit trying to light it, but he got it going fast enough and held it up in front of himself in triumph. As he did, he saw the others were long since ready to move. They glanced at each other, and Grinchard gave Micra a firm nod. "I'll lead the way." Farnham opened his mouth to protest, but Grinchard was already striding to the cave. The torch held high for them. Farnham hesitated only for a moment before following Grinchard in. He stopped once he was inside the cave to peer at their flickering lights pushed back in the darkness to see what they might reveal. One of the reasons that Farnham had been able to enter before, among many, was that he was worried that some dangerous mob might be set up a residence in the cave, turning it into his lair. He supposed that it would be inciting the probability of finding a strange new mob that he might be able to bring back to the zoo, but the fear of being eaten did a fine job tempering that. "Keep your eyes peeled for mobs," he called out to Grinchard. "Both good ones and bad ones. There's a difference. The good ones don't try to kill you." Grinchard laughed, entirely unworried. "But the bad ones would make fantastic additions to your zoo." The explorer had a point. Dangerous mobs could certainly get people more interested in visiting the zoo. He just didn't know if he wanted to take care of such beast. Sure, it meant more money, but would it be worth the risk? A part of him thought all creatures deserved to be cared for, but even he had a hard time arguing that it's true things like zombies and creepers. The chance of studying them up close, though, was tempting. In any case, the cave seemed to be abandoned. No mobs were living in it, at least as far as the torchlight could reveal. It both relieved Farnham and disappointed him. "It's empty," he said. Micro came up behind him and gestured deeper into the cave with a torch. "So go on in." Farnham swallowed hard and did just that. It turned out to be much easier than his fears had told him it would be. Grinchard went before him, lighting his way, proving that there was nothing to be scared about. "See," the explorer said with a wide grin. "Nothing to it." Farnham had to admit to himself his friends had been right. He'd been letting his temptation take control and keep him from exploring the wider world as he always wanted to explore. While he was terrified of the cave, having them there with him made all the difference. They wandered through the entire cave from one end to the other, but nothing jumped out to eat him at all. In fact, as far as Farnham could tell, the three of them were the only living creatures in the entire place. Despite himself, he heaved a deep sigh of relief, letting out the breath that he realized he was holding. The only thing they did spot in the cave were the plants in some far corners. Grinchard identified them immediately. "Hey look, azalea!" "That's lucky," Grinchard said. "You don't see any of these everywhere, you know?" "What's so lucky about it?" Farnham genuinely wanted to know. "Azalea roots often grow in one cave down into another. If we follow them, we might find a whole other cave below them." Farnham felt his heart skip a beat as he considered the prospect of digging into what he called the underworld and moving even further away from the mouth of the cave where they are already in. "And that's a good thing?" "It is if you like exploring," Grinchard clapped him on the back. "We didn't find any animals for your zoo here, but it's probably not that far to the next cave. It can't hurt to look." "Are you sure about that?" Farnham could think of lots of ways that it could get hurt, right off the top of his head. Grinchard chuckled. "Can you ever really be sure about anything?" Micro saw the look on Farnham's face and came over to reassure him. "You're right about azalea. The roots often lead straight down into another cave. One that has been protected from the surface has been sealed in. It's amazing that you can sometimes find more down there. Metals, minerals, even creatures. Farnham knew that she tossed that last one in to hook him. He also knew that it had worked. "You already come this far," she said softly. He gave her a reluctant nod. "I suppose it can't hurt to look." Micah grinned at him. She bounced with excitement. "May I do the honors?" She pulled out a diamond shovel. As a professional miner, she relied on her tools, and she invested in making sure she had the best. Grinchard chuckled as they waved toward her plant. "Be my guest." Farnham took a deep breath. He knew that Micah didn't really need such a fancy tool to follow the roots of Azalea, but the fact that she was using professional equipment like that suddenly made it all seem much more real. Like she really was digging a mine shaft, and he was going to follow her into it. He wasn't sure what he'd been able to do with such a thing on his own. Actually, he was positive he would have balked at it. The idea of digging his own way through the underworld still scared him, but he thought at least he could maybe follow his professional friend, who had tons of experience and knew what she was doing and would never ever abandon him, into a tunnel she was digging. Micah had led the way, then Farnham, and Grinchard bringing up the rear. She dug straight into the rooted dirt below, following the path of Azalea's roots. With a little nudge from Grinchard, Farnham kept up the right behind her, giving her just enough room to swing her shovel without smacking him with it. Whether the others had attended it or not, their marching orders helped Farnham feel safe. With one friend ahead of the other, and one seemed protected against anything horrible that could happen to him. The underworld might fill him with all sorts of worries, but his friends helped him push the worries aside. As Micah worked, Farnham admitted to himself that he wished he'd tried doing this with them before, a long time ago. He wasted so much time being held back by his fears. But here he was now, at least having the adventure of his life. He couldn't help but smile, even though he knew no one else could see it. He was still smiling when Micah's shovel broke into a new cave below them. As expert of mining she was, she didn't fall through the roof of the cave like Farnham probably would have. Instead, she called a quick halt while she stubbed a lit torch through the hole. She dug and peered into the cavern beyond. "It's pretty big," she reported back a moment later. "It goes on much further than I can see." Farnham couldn't help asking a nervous question. "How are we going to get to the cavern's floor from all the way up here?" Micah gave him an understanding laugh. "We got lucky. It's not far down from it. It's a short drop. It should be easy enough." She saw a doubt in Farnham's eyes and made him a quick offer and reassured him. "I'll go first." Without even waiting for a response from Farnham, much less anyone else, Micah slipped down the hole she carved out and disappeared. Farnham listened hard, but didn't hear her hit the bottom. Fighting for his friend, he darted toward her, stuck his head through the hole after her. "Micah!" He heard a giggle, and a moment later Micah lit a torch and looked up at him where she landed on a bunch of azaleas clustered together beneath her like a bed. "Come on down," she called up to him. "It's fine." Farnham fell back and took a moment to steel himself. For a horrible moment, he worried that Grinchard might have pushed past him and leave him alone in the tunnel. When he glanced back, though, he saw his friend patiently gesturing for him to proceed down the hole. "When you're ready," Grinchard said. With a little nod of Grinchard, Farnham lowered himself slowly into the hole until his arms couldn't stretch any longer. He thought he was only a few feet above the cave's floor, but he still hung there for a moment, waiting for his fingers to get tired, before he let go and landed on the soft plants below. As he landed, the impact led him to expel a huge breath, and he began to laugh quietly at himself. A moment later, Grinchard landed right next to him and patted him on the back. "Just look at it," Micah said breathlessly. "It's beautiful." Farnham stopped chuckling as Micah requested. Instantly, awe overtook him as well. The cave was huge, much larger than the one they had just seen in. The walls and ceiling were covered in hanging vines laced with more glowberries than he had ever seen in his entire life up to this point. They lit up the place like a moon that had been smashed with smithereens and shining from inside the cavern's walls. Besides the patch of azalea they landed in, other strands of it appeared along the uneven floor that undulated beneath the arching ceiling. They would have plenty of choices for routes to follow from there if they wanted to. Maybe too many. Farnham turned to the others who apologized to them for dragging his feet about coming here. He felt bad about making so many excuses for them leaving down before. He should have gone with them on the adventure long before this, but they aren't paying any attention to him and apparently didn't share his worries. Mike was too busy gawking at everything around and too worried about Farnham and how he finally managed to overcome his long-standing fears. He didn't have the heart to interrupt their right then. Instead, Farnham turned to Grinchard and discovered that his friend, with a huge smile on her face, the explorer waved their hand and indicated the whole scene around them and how amazing it was. "What did I tell you?" Chapter 4. Keep going. "I know," Farnham shook his head at himself. "I should have done something like this a long time ago, right? You're absolutely right about that." Grinchard just kept grinning at him. Farnham started at their surroundings. The cave seemed to go on forever. "So this is the biggest cave you've ever been in?" Grinchard snickered at the thought. "Not even close. There's one a ways south of here that's at least 10 times as big as this one, if you can believe that." They stretched their arms as wide as they could make them, much bigger. Why are you smiling like that? Grinch ran across her teeth and smiled even wider. Because it's still amazing, isn't it? Farnum could only nod and agree. On top of that, I get to share it with my two best friends. What could be better? With that, Grinch charged off into the cavern, their torch pushing back the dimness as they went. They cackled the entire way. What are they doing? Farnum said, shaking his head. Are they okay? Micah laughed at him. Exploring and loving it. He shot Farnum a mischievous look, and then what are you going to do? Shrug? Then she went racing after Grinchard before veering off the direction of her own, giggling as she went. Farnum hesitated for just the briefest of moments and then started after his friends. At about the point where Micah's path had diverged from Grinchard, she sailed off in the direction entirely his own. Farnum was so caught up in the moment that he didn't even occur to him to be scared. This was too amazing, and he could hear his friends laugh, echoing off the walls all around him. It felt like they were with him every step of the way. Not too far along, he came upon an underground river burbling right through the middle of the cavern. Perhaps the water was what carved the place out of the mountain in the first place, he thought. He wondered where it had been coming from, and he wondered where it might take him. Feeling free, he followed the current and wandering edges on the river, letting it guide his way through the cave. That's when he spotted them. Axolotls. He read about these amphibious creatures before and studied pictures of them in books, but he never come close to seeing one in real life. The moment he saw them, though, he immediately knew what he had to be. They were small creatures with damp skin, thick bodies, and long, spindly limbs. They had wide eyes and looked like they could see straight through you, and their wide mouths seemed like they were constantly smiling at you. He was smitten with them straight away. He knew right then he had to bring at least one of them back to show at his zoo. He picked into his bag and pulled out one of the water buckets he always carried with him just for an occasion. He hadn't had much opportunity to use it over the years, and he sometimes wondered why he still bothered with it. Some sense of obstinance or destiny had kept it there in his bag for the moment he needed it right now. All those doubts vanished as he charged toward the axolotls. The buckets raised over his head. As he reached the group of axolotls, he brought the bucket down, and with great astonishment, he snagged one of the slippery creatures with it. He brought the bucket up with him and gogged the wriggling creature strapped inside it. His eyes even wider than his own. It stared back at him, unsure what to make of the person who had just snatched up out of the river's chilly waters, and he instantly felt attached to it and started to comfort it. It's all right, little fella, he said to soothing tones. Everything's going to be fine. I'm not going to hurt you. In fact, I'm going to bring you home to my zoo and keep you well fed and safe. The axolotl kept wriggling for a bit, more than a little suspicious of Farnum and his bucket, but eventually surrendered to the moment and decided to ride along to see where the strange person woke him. Woohoo! Farnum shouted, starting the axolotl and wiggling around the inside of the bucket again. Are you okay? Micah called back. Her voice echoed off the cavern's wall so hard it was impossible to tell in which direction she stood. Never better, Farnum sounded. This place is amazing. I told you so, Grinch shouted from an entirely different direction, or it seemed. Farnum couldn't say for sure. There are you two anyhow, Micah called, curious. This place is incredible, but maybe we shouldn't lose one another in it. Grinch let loose a big belly laugh. Live a little. Go explore for a bit. When we're done, we can meet back by the way we came in. That sounded fantastic to Farnum. He was glad that Micah had expressed some worry about it before she had. Though he didn't like the spoil sport every time, and he was having far too much fun for the moment to give voice to such concerns. He looked at the axolotl swinging in his bucket and he grinned at it. He wasn't just sure how excited folks back in town would be to see such a creature. It would be the highlight of the zoo. Even something else in the river caught his eye. At first, he wasn't quite sure what it could be. It was just a flash of white against the midnight blue of the river. It was just enough to pique his curiosity. He had to get closer. Carrying the captured axolotl before him, Farnum moved further down the river, searching for another sign of what he might have seen, or at least thought he had. At first it eluded him, and he saw only the surface of the river, its swift current sending ripples undulating along it. Then he saw it again, sharper this time. Something almost a glowing white breached the surface, poked his head up, and then submerged again. The sight of it stopped Farnum's breath in his chest. He knew instantly both that what it had to be and what it was at the same time. Utterly impossible. A leucistic axolotl, living in caves far in the light of the sun, caused some creatures to lose all pigmentation, the color in their skin. It turned them ghostly white, the exact color Farnum had been moving in the water. Those axolotls came in pretty definite colors. Finding the leucistic one is such luminous skins incredibly rare, or so his biology books told him. To think that he might be within reach of one sent his heart fluttering. Realizing that he stopped breathing, Farnum drew in one large gasp of disbelief. Then he started moving toward the stunning creature he seen. hoping that he could spot it again. As he moved, he pulled out another water bucket. He wasn't sure how he'd be able to carry 2 axolotls back to the surface with him, but that was a problem he could solve later. Maybe Micah would carry one while he'd already caught. If Farnham managed to capture a Lewistic one, he was sure he would never want to put it down until it was safe and sound in a zoo, but he had to catch it first. When he reached the place where he'd been the creature swimming, it was gone. He was supposed to be expected. It looks like it was been moving deeper into the water, and the current would have carried it along. He would search for it farther downstream. He squinted hard and started for the river until it seemed to be staring back at him, but he couldn't see anything but the reflection of the torchlight on his water. He realized he'd have a better shot of seeing the rare axolotl skin without the light than with it, so he put the torch out. His eyes adjusted quickly to the dimness. It still illuminated softly by the glowberries hanging throughout the vines that festooned the place. They helped, but it still wasn't quite enough. He decided to enter the river itself and get a better angle. The water was cold and clear, running over rocks instead of mud, and he found he could see it through if it were glass. The reflection of the glow berries still made it hard to see things farther away from him, though. He decided to try one more thing. He took a deep breath and plunged entirely under the water surface. The icy waters nearly shocked the air out of Farnham's lungs, but he managed to steady himself. He let his watertight pack float on the surface above him, which made it easier for him to hold his already filled bucket up out of the water. Farnham peered through the icy water, looking farther downstream. He'd been able to see the man before, and he spotted it. There it was, clear as day, the Lewistic axolotl. The pair creature didn't seem to notice Farnham at all. There probably weren't many predators down here that would need to keep his guard up against, so it likely wouldn't pay much attention to Farnham even if he saw him. Farnham decided to use this at his advantage. He surfaced long enough to grab fresh breath air and then plunged down into the water and began swimming toward the creature, entirely submerged. The entire time the pale creature seemed to be getting closer and closer, making Farnham more and more determined to catch right up with it. What a find it would be. But then it disappeared altogether in less than an instant. Confused, Farnham pushed forward, swimming faster, hoping that the creature would simply round to the bend in the river. And in a way, it had. Farnham was too preoccupied with wondering whether the river bent left or right at the point to consider another option. He darted forward as fast as he could, determined not to let the Lewistic axolotl get away. That's why he didn't see the waterfall until he was staring right over it. Chapter 5. Rescue yourself. Before Farnham knew what was happening, the river's current grew more powerful than he could imagine. It felt like a giant had grabbed him and was pulling him along now. He turned around and tried to swim the other direction, but it did him no good. He was so desperate at this point that he even let go of the bucket in which he was carrying the axolotl he already captured. As precious as having a creature was to him, as much as it meant to his zoo, it wasn't going to be any help to him if he never made it home alive. Farnham tried swimming against the current with all his might, but the current only got stronger at the point and pulled him along faster. Terrified, he struggled to the surface and gasped for air. As he did, he turned about and saw that the ceiling of the cave was coming right down on top of him. Soon there wouldn't be a surface to return to. "Help!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Help me!" All he managed to get out before the current swept him beneath the surface again. He knew it would do him no good. The echoes in the cave would keep his friends from figuring out which way he'd gone, and it was already far too late. Despite his other panic, Farnham decided that the only thing to do was to go through the current. In fact, he turned to swim with it. He only had so much air left inside him, and he wasn't going to waste it trying to fight the current. His last hope was the river would wind up in another cave again, fast. Otherwise, he could drown for sure. He had just turned around when the bottom of the river dropped out entirely and took him with it. If he could have, he would have screamed the whole way down. If he could only tell if he'd hit the bottom of the waterfall by the way of descent slowed almost to a stop. At that point, the water above him began pounding down on him mercilessly, keeping him pinned down. Exhausted, he realized he couldn't fight such power. The only thing he could do was go with the flow. He let the current push him down hard enough he could bounce off the rocks below. The impact scraped and bruised him, but it also knocked him out of the center of the waterfall, pushing him out of the way from its base. The moment later, Farnham popped out of the river like a fishing bobber. As he reached the surface, he instantly gasped for air, and he felt like he'd never tasted anything so amazing. The blackness had been rising around the edges of the vision retreated, and he saw he was in another cave. This one was a high ceiling covered with vines and glowberries. It's much like the ones he'd just left, but it wasn't nearly as lush, at least in the parts where he could see. The river widened here, and it current slowed to a crawl. After floating along the flow for a moment, just long enough to catch his breath and let his heartbeat return to normal, Farnham reached down with his feet and realized he could touch the ground. Better than that, he could actually stand. With his feet finally beneath him, Farnham stretched up to his full height and discovered the water was only waist high here. He stood against the current and surveyed his new cave. It seemed that river covered most of the cave's floor. It hadn't been as high as ceiling. Farnham likely could have drowned. By the light of the glowberries, he could see only a single patch of dry land of the river's left. He decided to make for it, being careful to watch for sinkholes or other hazards in the water. While he was at it, he kept an eye out for Leucistic axolotl, but he didn't see it anywhere. His heart sank at that. He'd gone through so much, and he was honestly happy to be alive at this point, but finding that pale amphibian might have made an ordeal feel at least a little bit worth it. As he made it to the little land of the river's edge, though, he spotted the axolotl he'd captured before, and he still in the bucket, but despite that he seemed no worse for wear. It alternately swam about in the bucket's depths and stretched out on the water's surface as if sunning itself on the riverbank. Farnham sat down next to the captured axolotl and reached out his hand to pet it. To his delight, it brought up its head to meet his hand. While he didn't want to lose the creature, he decided that it didn't make much sense for him to keep it in the bucket if they had no way to cave anyhow. If something happened to him, he wanted the axolotl to be trapped too. He tipped over the bucket and let the creature out. The axolotl stared up at him for a moment, then it paddled over him and raised his head to him for more petting. Farnham was delighted to oblige him. "Don't worry," he said to the axolotl. "I'll get us out of here, soon." He reached out for the surroundings. I'm not sure how. Satisfied with the petting, the axolotl turned around and began to explore the new surroundings on its own. Tired and not quite ready to face the predicament, Farnham watched the creature wander off. It crawled its way across a small land island before the far end of it. Something was just beyond the axolotl caught Farnham's eye. At first, he wasn't sure what it was. It seemed to be the blackness and the darkness, but a sharp, tall, and rectangular-shaped thing coming like the door. But that door would be doing down here. Furious, Farnham pushed himself to his feet and staggered over toward the dark rectangle. As he got closer, he realized it was just a frame of a gateway standing there on the edge of the island. It had no walls around it. Not only did it not touch the cave's wall, it didn't have anything inside of it. He didn't understand why someone would have just put something there, or what he might have had. It was simply a piece of art. Had it been their building of some sort here once? A gateway, if that's what it was, seemed to have fashioned entirely of black volcanic rock. That was mysterious enough, but as Farnham gazed through it, he saw something that he understood even less. A cavern wall behind the gateway was covered with some kind of writing that formed a gigantic story of massive as a mural. He couldn't read any of it, and he wasn't even sure if the symbols he saw on the wall were letters. He stared closely at them and realized that many of them looked more like crude pictures instead. He'd never seen anything like it, and despite the fact he was trapped deep in the underworld and lost track of his friends as well, he wanted to take a closer look at it. The light from the glowberries, though, wasn't enough. He needs something better. That's when Farnham's stomach growled and reminded him of the other concerns in a person's life than just light. The fact that he was also shivering and being wet made him realize there's something he could build to solve a number of problems at once. Farnham reached into his pack and pulled out some logs, some sticks, and a lump of coal that assembled a nice, neat pile for a fire. Upon inspection, they all seemed like they'd stayed dry enough in his pack, even though he'd gone over the waterfall with them. He decided not to question his luck. He reached even deeper into his pack and pulled out his flint and steel. He wasn't experienced at using such things in his friends, and he knew how they worked. He just needed to strike them together enough to produce a spark to ignite the campfire. Simple, right? He tried it a few times, but nothing happened. The flint and steel produced sparks, and they didn't catch with the firewood. He decided he needed both hands to work the flint and steel. He could really use some sparks going. He knelt down next to the odd frame and struck the flint and steel again and again and again. Soon enough, he had a roaring campfire going, and the heat of the light threw it off and made the cave seem much cozier. He lit a torch with it and gazed up at the pictures on the wall as better look at them, but they still didn't make much sense. He set the torch down next to the odd frame and was about to dig into his pack to find something to cook for a meal. That's when he noticed the gateway had filled with a deep purpling swirl and started to glow. Dang. So, by just pure coincidence, he found the nether portal. I guess it's the first nether portal in Minecraft Legends. It's very interesting, though, because I mean, I knew portals were a canon thing in the game, but not axolotls. 1 second, please. Chapter 6. Hello. Okay. Sorry, I had to write that down for next time. But yeah, axolotls are not a canon in this book, so it's kind of strange to have like axolotls be a reoccurring thing. Huh. Well, that's gonna be interesting for sure. Let's see. We are gonna read next time. Page. Come on, mouse. Mouse, you want to wake up? Mousy moo. We're gonna read page 42 to. Where's 60? 60, 60. 60. Oh, 60. Fantastic. So 18 pages. And then next time after that, we're going to do 61 to 80. 80, come on. 80. 93, I guess. Oh, oops, right. I'm going too far up. To 84. So next time is going to be 61 to 84, which is 24 pages. And then, yeah. So we might be done faster than actually expected. So, yeah. I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful day. If you like Be Efficient, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.